There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "Some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?"
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the democratic way. And now your host, Stephen Hanks.
Well, if you've been listening to this show since we launched 6 weeks ago, you know our opening theme song, if you will, are those snippets of iconic speeches from legendary Democrats and patriotic progressives. I was actually thinking of changing that up for this morning's show to highlight some future iconic speeches from this past week's incredible 4-day Democratic National Convention in Chicago, especially the ones given by Michelle and Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Senator Raphael Warnock, future Speaker of the House Hakeem Jeffries, and, of course, the next President of the United States, Kamala Harris. And I'm sure my listening audience is very hip enough to realize what all those names have in common. They are all black. And that is something that must have driven any MAGA Republicans, and especially the MAGA in chief himself, Donald Trump, absolutely crazy. Good morning to all of you out there in Sedona and throughout the Verde Valley, listening right now on this August 24th, 2024, through KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM Mellow Mountain Radio. Like the announcer said, my name is Stephen Hanks, and this radio show, which is heard every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., is called The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the democratic way. And no, I am not Superman. I just play one on television. No, I'm sorry, but I digress. And I also want to welcome folks from all over Arizona and around the country who may be tuning into the live stream on mellowmountainradio.com, and anyone who is listening to the podcast version on Apple or Amazon Podcast, YouTube, or Spotify. In the KAZM studio for this morning's show, I have three very politically savvy guests who live in Sedona and the Verde Valley area who are going to join me in a kind of a cable news network-like discussion and analysis of the DNC this past week. But before I introduce my fellow patriotic progressives, I want to offer a few personal observations about the convention. First off, because I've pretty much been a passionate political nerd since I was 8 years old, I've probably seen every Democratic National Convention since 1964. And I just aged myself, which I keep telling myself I shouldn't do on the show. I've seen many of the RNCs since that time. That's, of course, during the election cycles when I could bring myself to watch them. Needless to say, I haven't watched much of the past 3 anointings of Donald Trump because my blood pressure medication only lasts so long. With the possible exception of the 2008 Obama convention, excuse me, this DNC was the tightest, most entertaining, and most inspiring I've ever witnessed. Each night seemed to be better than the next, culminating in Kamala Harris accepting the nomination on Thursday night. And you know what I saw those 4 nights, both on the stage and in the audience? Thousands upon thousands of patriotic progressives Basically, Democrats who are no longer intimidated or afraid to wear their progressivism on their sleeves and announce it with authority and pride and, yes, patriotism. And finally, through the overwhelming expression of freedom and liberty and the waving of thousands of American flags and the persistent chanting of USA, Democrats have finally told all Americans that being a liberal or a progressive is not a label to run away from, but to wear as a badge of honor. This was the Freedom, Patriotism, and Diversity Convention, compared with the one the Republicans ran last month, which was the Authoritarian, Insurrectionist, and White Supremacy Convention, with a heaping helping of Christian nationalism and American carnage messaging thrown in for good measure. The Democrats sent to the stage to speak one young superstar after another, while the Republicans wheeled out a string of election-denying, hate-fueled sycophants. What I watched over those 4 nights of the DNC, during which I easily went through a box of Kleenex from tearing up almost every half hour, was the reinvigoration of the Democratic Party and the progressive populism that I grew up with. A political party that was driven to presidential victories from JFK to Bill Clinton to Barack Obama by the working and middle class, unions and minorities, and it was a glorious sight to behold. So now I want to introduce my guest joining me this morning for a more in-depth conversation of this past week DNC. And because I've got a little choked up frog in my throat, I'm going to take a sip of water on the air as we speak. Hold on. You're not supposed to do that, but
you did it professionally.
You are a rule breaker.
Good job.
Stephen.
I know.
You are a real rule breaker.
What do they? There's a word that people are using a lot now to say that they're different and they break rules like that. I forgot what the word is.
Neurodivergent.
Yeah, right.
I hope so.
There's probably a lot of words that we can't say on the air.
Out of the boxer.
Diana Christensen is the vice president of the Democrats of the Red Rocks, an organization in which I am also a proud member. And something that I did not know, Diana is also currently a candidate for the position on the Sedona Fire Board. When did that happen?
That's right. The last few months.
Okay. That kind of caught me by surprise, Diana. Diana has a long history of political activism. From 1982 to 85, she was the vice president of the Alice B. Toklas Lesbian Gay Democratic Club in San Francisco and was appointed to the San Francisco Commission on the Status of Women by then-Mayor Dianne Feinstein. She was one of the first in the nation civilian investigators of police misconduct for a major municipality. Over her lifetime, Diana has knocked on doors in California, Nevada, Arizona, and Iowa. She has come to believe that Democrats will win the presidency in 2024 and in those critical down-ballot races by engaging in honest and respectful one-on-one conversation with our neighbors. Diana, I'm with you there, and that last note is something Tim Walz might have said. You know, bringing up the neighbors, right?
Absolutely.
That was the thing. Mike Cosentino.
It's actually Cosentino.
Cosentino. Mike has held several leadership positions in various Democratic organizations in and around the Verde Valley, including serving 5 years on the board of the Democrats of the Red Rocks. And I know this because I was on the board for a while, and whenever we had our Zoom meetings, Mike would always stir up trouble. It was like... In the 1980s, Mike was president of his National Education Association, Teachers Local, another very Tim Walzian thing to do, by the way, and is currently on the board of directors of the Rural Organizing Initiative in Cottonwood. Mike is also on the steering committee of the Verde Valley Democrats, where he has been a member since 2002, and Mike also serves on the state committee of the Arizona Democratic Party. My third guest is Dev Ross, an award-winning screenwriter who has written film and television for Disney, Amazon Studios, Universal, Nickelodeon, and Mattel, and many others. Dev is currently the writer and director for the live cemetery shows put on by the Sedona Heritage Museum, which, by the way, has been my sponsor for the month of August. Did you know that?
I do.
For my Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks show. So it gave me an opportunity to get that plug in. So thank you. And she's now casting. It's a new Heritage Museum show. Yes.
It's the
Dead
touring
Quilters Society.
Yeah, it's a touring exhibit for the museum. It'll tour all over the place.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
On the political side, which is why she's here, really, Dev has produced, written, and performed shows for Democratic fundraisers. And as a writer at Disney, she was often told her TV show scripts had too many underlying political messages. I like that as part of your bio. In Sedona, Dev has been a phone banker, a canvasser, and postcard writer for Democrats running for offices, for local and state offices. And we have both participated in marches for women's rights and abortion rights on Route 89A in West Sedona on very hot days.
Yes, very hot
and
days.
I also want you to know that you have the honor of being the first person to be on both of my KAZM radio shows. Because you were on
I
Sedona
paid you
Live.
enough to... No, I didn't.
So you don't get any kind of award for that,
No,
but
yeah.
but it'll be all over the podcast. Everybody will find. I welcome all of you to the Patriotic Progressive. Dev, I actually want to start with you.
Uh-oh.
Because you're the performance and entertainment guru in the group, and I really wanted to get your take on the production and presentation, the production values during the DNC. And, your personal response to the whole Megillah, as we say in Yiddish.
I thought, wow, they really did their homework. They really brought in people who knew how to shoot. I mean, there was a lot, we call it live streaming, when your cameras are, it's all live and you're switching cameras. And I thought, wow, they spared maybe no expense, but also they got the best. Mm-hmm. It was so state of the art. The people that they had performing, the music, everything was state of the art. It pushed the envelope. It was incredibly well done. And oftentimes, people will see a movie because I've written movies and I've written television, and they go, "Oh, that must be so fun." And yeah, it's fun because you love it. But when you think about what goes into production values, the kind of expertise, timing, editing, writing, I mean, they knocked it out of the park.
And every night was kind of like a Jerry Lewis telethon.
Yeah.
It was 4 or 5 hours that you have to fill. And it's got to be, now, a lot of people complain they went over a couple of nights because speeches went long, but, that's like being a little picky, I think. But that's a tremendous amount of time to structure.
Yeah.
At the same time, for the novice eye, it went one after the other. There was very little downtime, which is pretty unusual in my history of watching these things.
Yeah, when you hear Trump was so upset when he was speaking for the black journalists, because there was a 35-minute delay, and then there was another thing that he put on a rally where there was a big, maybe hour delay, and that's the norm. I mean, there is always technical problems. So for them, for the DNC to have the foresight on the production end, to have it come off so seamlessly is really an act of professionalism and faith. I mean, the fact that it happened, you almost want to think it's supernatural that it came together so well, because so many things can happen. So that was beautiful.
And how about, this really impressed me as much as anything else. So on night 2, when they nominated Kamala and Tim Walz, they're holding another rally in Wisconsin next door, and they timed it so after she was officially declared the candidate, she and Tim Walz walk out onto the stage in Milwaukee right at that moment.
Oh, yeah, because you got a stage manager going, hold.
Right.
Now! So, that's a tremendous amount of coordination. When you see just what it takes to shoot a film, it's not just the camera and the director. You've got 50 people there on a crew making sure everything happens timely. So it was masterful.
Yeah, it was tremendous. Unfortunately, they had to cut James Taylor, but
I read about that. But he was a good sport about it.
I'm sure he volunteered to give it up. So, Diana, what were your overall impressions of the event in general and your takeaways? I'm sure there are tons of things that you have to say.
Tons of things, but, one after the other, I think there was positivity. There were good ideas. They were specific. They introduced Kamala every step of the way, and they rebutted the notion that she's not ready. They gave her background and made clear, and especially I think Michelle Obama just came out and put it in such a strong way that she's more qualified than almost anybody who's ever gone for this job, perhaps except Biden.
I was thinking about giving my producer Ryan little snippets of Michelle's speech to play during the show, but I realized you'd have to do the whole speech because the whole speech was, I think it was the best speech of the convention.
Absolutely. I think it was the best speech I've ever heard.
Wow.
I think it'll go down in history.
It's going to be an iconic speech. 10 years from now, if I'm still doing this show, it'll be tacked on to JFK.
Yeah, it'll be the new bar. I mean, it's going to be the new bar for speeches and convention.
And if your listeners haven't heard it, that's the one to go back and listen to. She introduces some pretty interesting concepts. At one point, she talks about the affirmative action of generational wealth.
Yes, that was a
and
great
the comparison of those in the middle class who may not have had that opportunity, and the other side that has been given many advantages. It's a great concept, and it gives us an understanding. I think it's a building block to understanding why those from slavery still struggle. Of course they do, because that generational wealth has just not been passed down in America in the same way it has for white people.
I so wholeheartedly agree, because when you hear people arguing against DEI and that it needs to be phased out, it's because they really do not understand how so many of more wealthy people can fall forward easily,
right?
Versus people of color or the middle, just other people outside of that, and it's like they look at it in a tiny little box rather than looking at the huge scope of it. And I thought she did that so well, so packaged, so beautifully, so simply, that how do you argue it?
Yeah.
How do you argue against it?
And as great as everybody says the economy is doing, and it's undeniably a lot better, jobs and people's income going up, there is still major income disparity throughout the country as we speak these days. Mike, what were your impressions?
Absolutely, the inequality, is still there. And that's going to be a hard sell for the Democrats in going forward. That there's still inflation. Doesn't matter that it's coming down. Doesn't matter that gas is $2.59 a gallon, $2.59 in Des Moines.
Right.
They are going to play this thing, and it resonates. Certainly, it resonates in the Verde Valley hugely. One of the things I loved about the convention was that we took back the word freedom.
Yep.
Which was we took back the flag, and we took back small towns.
Took back patriotism.
So that was just to see that word everyday, freedom, and what freedom meant to I want to say to a Democrat, but to the people that we represent. Freedom for your own health choices, freedom for all these other things, freedom to afford to go to school, to have some kind of education, freedom for job training, all of these things that we define as freedom was great to see. I was also in the National Guard, by the way. I was, besides being a retired teacher, I was in the Arizona National Guard.
You are Tim Walz. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Tim Walz on the show today.
I don't pretend to be... teachers recognize competency, and I recognize Tim Walz's competency and his dedication.
Right.
I was not that dedicated. We'll just leave it at that. The highlights for me were Doug Emhoff, the first gentleman. Women were falling in love with him as he spoke. By
the way, I love those signs that some people are holding up. Doug, the first mensch.
The first mensch. Yeah.
Well, just the whole idea of telling the story of how they met and how and all of these wonderful personal and heartfelt insights into Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And when they blended family was another big thing for certainly a lot of people. When his kids started calling Kamala Mamala, he knew they were going to be okay.
I'm glad you brought up the family part, because this is something that occurred to me after the convention when I was watching all of the analysis on cable news. The family theme came up a lot, and when you really think about it, when have you ever heard Donald Trump at a rally, at the RNC, anywhere, talk about his mother and father? I can't think of one.
Or his children.
Or his children.
His wife, other than saying she's good
looking. And Mike, to get back to your point about taking back freedom and the flag and patriotism, what kind of still bothers me about that is that the Democrats never really conceded that. The Republicans over the decades have done such a great job messaging.
They have.
About the fact that Democrats don't subscribe to those things, and because they never had any real policies other than tax cuts. Yes. So the culture war that they've been going against the Democrats for about 40 years or more since Reagan, maybe even going back before Reagan, that's been their messaging. The Democrats are evil because they're not patriots, they don't believe in freedom, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I want to mention the Republicans that were, and everybody can join in this, the Republicans that they spoke at the Democratic convention. Right. John Giles, the mayor of Mesa, and who also said, by the way, one of them, I'm going to remember which one, said, "Hey, I just found out Democrats are patriotic too."
Right.
I believe it might have been
that was Adam
Kinzinger. Yeah. But Giles from Mesa says the party of McCain is gone, and what's left doesn't deserve us, doesn't deserve our support, which I thought was great. Adam Kinzinger. Those are the speeches you should go back and listen to. Not that you shouldn't listen to Michelle and Brock.
Before you go on with that, one of the things that was striking to me is that Adam opened up the big tent in the Democratic Party to include Republicans. And Oprah did it for independents.
Right.
And it became apparent that this is an all-inclusive effort around values.
And one of the lines of the convention, and I think you guys will agree with me, came from the former lieutenant governor of Georgia, who said to his Republican colleagues, if you vote for Kamala Harris, it doesn't prove you're a Democrat, it proves you're a patriot.
That's right.
That just, I think, blew everybody in the hall away.
I think that the planners of the convention said, this has got to be our theme. We have got to present Democrats as patriots, as family people, as human beings, because you're right, the Republicans have done such a good job in messaging and othering us.
Yes.
They have othered us for so long. They have dehumanized. I used to think, and this is pretty radical, but I used to think, how did Hitler come to power? I mean, I can't fathom. And then I'm watching it in real time in these past few years, the demonization, the othering, the especially because I have
a passionate
I have passionate conversations with many people, and their presumptions about who I am and what I believe. Well, you believe this and you believe that. And you're like, whoa. You just listed a laundry list of somebody who is not an empathetic person, who is a horrible person, and you know nothing about me. So let me go back and tell you how I was raised, how I came up. And that's exactly what the Democratic Convention did. They went back and they went, wait, let us remind you that we're mothers and we're fathers and sisters and brothers, and sometimes we have trouble having kids, or that we struggle. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was great to roll everybody back and go, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. We are not the other. We are you.
That was what was so important, going back to Doug Emhoff to start at the beginning of the convention. Him talking about his love for Kamala. Mm-hmm. How often do you hear that? When have you heard Donald Trump talking about love in a deep and meaningful way? And that's why all the women have fallen in love with him, even me, an avowed lesbian. I adored him for that because it resonated with me about our families and what brings us to them and how important they are.
Well, that's it. He's still got the text string of the guys he went to school with,
right?
High school with, that he grew up with. And now, I as an Italian-raised Catholic, my high school was half Jewish in Buffalo, New York, and he's like all these guys I grew up with, and that's the other part. Here's Doug Emhoff, second gentleman, openly talking about his faith. Kamala goes to synagogue with him. Mm-hmm. He goes to Easter Mass with her, and just this complete opposite of everything we hear in other political circles.
And that is the new America. That is the progressing and evolving America. We no longer, like when my dad grew up in Chicago, the Jewish kid in, his little Jewish area, it was a very poor area, his dad used to love Italian bread, and he used to have to run through the Italian neighborhood and his dad knew, you're going to get beat up, but toughen up, dude. And, run through the Italian neighborhood to get his dad's bread. And he would come back, beat up. But, those were where you had all those. And I'm sure, of course, they still exist. There's neighborhoods. But the way that we are emerging as assimilation happens, we are a pluralistic society. Yeah. And that's what I love so much about his story is it's not, oh my God, they're mixing. Oh my God. Yeah. No, my God, we're mixing. We are fulfilling the dream of America. We are a pluralistic society.
And you want to talk about the family situation at the convention? I don't know about you, but I completely broke up when I saw Gus Walls crying. I'm choking up now just thinking about it. Yeah. Saying that's my dad on camera.
I bawled my eyes out.
And this is about all you need to say about the Republican Party and the people that follow them. They had major media figures on social media criticizing that kid about having that kind of emotion. I mean, I don't know how much lower they can get, but millions of people support them. So, I don't know what you can say. Well, I want to switch real quick because Mike, you brought up John McCain. Right. And that gives me a good segue for this. And then we'll get back to talking about the DNC. I had to interject this because Trump was in Arizona the last 2 days. Thursday, in an attempt to counter-program, he was at Cochise County, Arizona border. And then yesterday he held a rally in Glendale where RFK Jr. announced he was dropping out of the race as a third-party candidate and endorsed Trump, of course, thereby exponentially increasing the weirdness factor of the Republican Party and the Trump campaign. I mean, Dev, could you even write characters like this? I don't think so. But maybe.
Well,
maybe
I have parody. Well, let me tell you about what, yes, only because just a side note, after Trump was elected, for a television project, I interviewed the Grand Dragon. He was also a chaplain for the KKK in Arkansas.
Okay.
And I went down the rabbit hole with that guy. I was not allowed to tell him anything about myself. In fact, my gay Mexican Marine director was squeezing my knee to make sure that I didn't say anything. But when I heard this person's rationale for their beliefs and how he loved Trump, my world came undone. I went, wait, this is, I almost can believe anything now.
Yeah.
After hearing this man speak and his agenda, which has been slowly coming true in the last 8 years.
Anyway, the reason I brought up the stuff in Arizona was in what I think was a brilliant counter move, and I don't know if you guys heard about this. Yesterday, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs proclaimed tomorrow, August 25th, until August 31st, 2024, as John McCain Democracy Week, recognizing Senator John McCain's legacy on what would have been his 88th birthday on August 29th and the 6-year anniversary of his death on August 25th. The proclamation recognizes Senator McCain's enduring legacy in the state of Arizona and his lifetime achievements fighting for freedom, democracy, country over party, and human rights in the United States and around the globe. Governor Hobbs is honoring the man who Donald Trump said wasn't a hero during the Vietnam War because he was captured. But I digress.
Well, that was,
yeah. I mean,
well placed.
Well done, Katie.
Well done,
Diana.
What can you say about that?
Right, Diana. Talk a little bit about what your impressions of the diversity. And the Democratic Party has always been diverse. I mean, we know that. But when you looked at the convention on television, I'm sure the people who were there felt this. And I'm going to be talking to Ellen Ferraro next week, who was a delegate from the Democrats of the Red Rocks, will be on the show. But what was your impression of the diversity, which was off the charts to me?
It was awesome. It was amazing. And it's not only the diversity. I am someone of mixed heritage, and I'm not recognizable because I look white. But I grew up in foster homes in the Bay Area of California, and I had many, many times where people were telling me how to look more white.
Wow.
And that was my generation of Asian and white descent. We went into this place where we're nominating a mixed race presidential candidate, and it's phenomenal to me because it just changed everything emotionally for me. And watching the people that were in the room that represent America, it's a representation of who's here. Everybody is at the table.
That's the comment I heard most from other people, is about the diversity. But I want to get back to McCain and the Republicans for a second.
Please.
All the Republicans that were at the Democratic convention. But what I want to get in here is McCain, the legacy of Goldwater, Barry Goldwater. Here, when we're in Sedona, which is we're no strangers to the Goldwaters back in the 70s when I lived here, and that whole Arizona independent spirit, where you may belong to a political party, but Goldwater got hammered. But he was, and now he would be a far left liberal, as McCain was getting ostracized in the party. So that was a big deal. And sometime or another we have to mention Bernie.
Sure.
We're talking about, 40%. They lifted 40% of children out of poverty just with a child tax credit.
Right.
But he mentioned and first of all, the convention was quietest, by the way, when Bernie was speaking. Not because he was scaring the crap out of them, because he was talking about traditional things that the Democratic Party, so many of us would like to see them get back to, which it seems like they are. They're really rolling the dice. Once again, stepping back and looking at the big picture, they're rolling the dice. They're being the job supporting, the education supporting, the woman supporting party that we all think they are or thought they were, but they're the whole neoliberal thing, which Bill Clinton was our best Republican president.
Mike, let me just interrupt you.
Yes, please.
So, because this is just speaking to your. What's so weird to me about some of the commentary that I've been listening to the last couple of days is this notion that the mainstream media is throwing out there that the Democrats are trying to appeal to moderates. The Democrats are coming back to the center. The two biggest ovations during that convention were for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Exactly.
There is, it's.
I think they're just trying to reframe it. They're not coming back to the center.
Well, they're taking pride in being liberals.
They're just stating that our values. We share values with Republicans about love and family, and we share those values. All the stuff that there were so many culture wars against us for the last few years that people forgot that those aren't.
We were playing defense all the time.
Yeah, we were always playing defense, and this was just a chance to the flower to open up and say, "This is, this is what we are."
Well,
right.
That's,
go ahead.
That's better. 60%. I mean, that I like that interpretation. The 60% of people Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Right. Bernie said we need a 10% plus increase in Social Security. Mm-hmm. Bernie said, and these are the kinds of things that I think that people want to hear.
Well, they all poll well. That's what's so crazy about the debate in this campaign. All the things that Republicans want to take away or destroy, like abortion rights, poll 70% or higher among Americans. I mean, it's just.
I also want to say one of the criticisms against Kamala has been that she's not specific about some of the notions that she's put forth. But she has said she'll go back and sign a child tax credit again, and a credit for those who give birth to a baby that year in addition. Mm-hmm. And any number of
the $25,000 that they're going to give people to help them
for
buy
mortgages.
A home.
Those are very specific notions that are going to help people with their actual day-to-day lives.
Right, and we know what the argument's going to be if Trump can even make these arguments when he's not talking about his grievances. But the old Republican Party would have argued against these proposals by saying, "Where's the money going to come from?"
And they're socialist, and they'll say they're socialist.
Right, they'll say they're socialist. Where's the money? You know where the money comes from? Billionaires being taxed at the rate everybody else gets taxed. Corporations finally getting that. That's where the money comes from. This is why we don't have good things. We don't have nice things.
That's a Bernie endeavor, and that's also Elizabeth Warren.
Exactly.
Who's kind of disappeared.
But like Kamala, I think is basically going to take the Biden agenda that she's been part of and just continue it and expand on it. And Mike, I don't know how you feel about it. I don't think what she's proposing and what they want to do is anything incredibly radical. I mean, these are not liberal and progressive ideas. These are ideas that help people. Where these policies became labeled, and that's the word, that labeling, that these things became labeled as extreme left and progressive, which has become a dirty word on the right.
Well, framing. It's framing, and that's where the Republicans have been so brilliant. Right. They frame things. They'll take everything like I can hear them now. $25,000 to new homeowners. That's socialism. And then socialism and communism, and they frame it all in that. And so people that I argue with immediately say, well, you're a socialist, you're a communist, you're a socialist. Well, you know what? I try to explain. I was raised in a family of socialists and communists that came from Europe, Eastern Europe. My father was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, and then he became a capitalist.
Once he got a couple of books in his pocket.
Well, he was very young, and coming from Europe, his parents, and being involved in the Bolshevik Revolution. I mean, there was a lot of thought change, and people in new environments go through change. Their situation changes. There are changes. And when people talk, it just infuriates me. I grew up at the socialist workers camp. You know, in Southern California. I was raised on those speeches. I've heard European socialism and communism versus what people here call that socialism.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
It
is ridiculous. It's uneducated. But the Republicans have done a great job of framing it, name-calling it, pointing to it, and then people never do their due diligence.
With the willing conspiracy of the mainstream media.
Yes.
In other words,
Yes,
who's gonna,
absolutely.
They're going to jump on the 25,000. And
it's $25,000 for Pete's sake, and it's 2024. That's
exactly.
not a ton of money. And if you look at the amount of money that the United States government gave back during the pandemic to businessmen who were millionaires and billionaires, it's a far cry. There's hardly any difference.
Exactly.
Except that the $25,000 is going to help a lot of people get into housing.
In a red state, Oklahoma, look what, I don't know if you're familiar with Tulsa Remote.
No.
The founding fathers, there's huge corporations there, KAZM, they were bleeding people. And when I went to Tulsa 30 years ago, it was like, wow, this is an armpit. Sorry, Tulsans. This is an armpit. I just came back a few weeks ago, and that place has transformed because they offered $10,000 to people to come and live there if they worked remote.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic especially, and two of my kids went there and have established really wonderful lives. I was just there. It's diverse. They've planted trees. The Arkansas River is being developed. There's bike paths, and I mean, it's amazing what that infusion of $10,000 to these young people starting out, working remote, now starting families, has done in that community. So you see by investing, exactly what you're saying, investing in these people, $10,000 is not a lot, especially for huge companies like KAZM and a lot of the oil industries there. Yeah. And it's sustaining them.
Here, thank you for that. Here's what I'd like to ask the thousands of people that show up at Trump rallies. Okay, the MAGA. How many of you are going to be able to take advantage of a $35 a month cap on your insulin? And looking at that crowd, and I'm sorry, this probably is not nice
Steve,
to say.
Careful, Stephen.
That some of these people have diabetes. How many of those people, the older people in the MAGA crowds, are on board with cutting Social Security and Medicare? I mean, this is the kind of stuff, that they're not reading Project 2025. But, this is what's so crazy about this. The people that support Donald Trump and the Republican Party get the benefit of these socialist programs.
They're voting against their best interests.
Well, American socialism needs to be defined. If the Democrats do anything, maybe in the next year after Kamala's elected, we can define American socialism and how well it works as an offshoot or as a continuation of Roosevelt's American socialism.
Do you think that the people at the convention started doing that?
Yes. I want to get to Hakeem Jeffries, though.
Okay. Oh, definitely.
Because he talked about...
my Brooklyn homeboy.
Just a living wage. A living wage.
Yeah.
That's...
such a radical concept.
Exactly. That's all Democrats are asking for. A living wage. If you work, you can afford to live. If you work, you can afford to eat. And that's... that... I'm sorry. I'm referring to my notes. A lot of American dream talk. And Jeffries and others talked about it. And I want to...
Kamala, by the way, talks about one job to be able to support your family.
Yes.
That's an amazing concept for the people that are struggling for 2 and 3 jobs.
I think that ship may have sailed, but it's nice to think about.
A unified theme from the Democratic Party. Who would have ever thought?
I know.
That they are talking about the same thing with the same. There are so many good points. I sort of disagree with go back and listen to Barack, listen to Michelle. Do that.
Right.
But don't limit it to that.
Oh, yeah.
There's
Raphael
so
Warnock
many.
was incredible.
Pritzker talked about
JB
what a real billionaire. What a great comment.
A socialist billionaire. Who would have thought?
He's the governor, the mayor
of Governor of Illinois.
Governor of Illinois. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, what's tough about having this conversation is we could probably have done a 3-hour show and talk about all the amazing things. By the way, I have to quickly point out as an editor and a writer, Hakeem Jeffries is the master of alliteration. I love him for that. I mean, if you listen to him, he's like unbelievable. Diana, any other thoughts you have? What are the Democrats of the Red Rocks going to do between now and November to do what Michelle Obama said?
Well, as the heat dissipates, we're putting teams of folks out on the street to go talk door to door. We are teaming up with the Kamala campaign and walking door to door, and with also the message that we want you to vote from the bottom up, right? So that we get all of the Democrats going through our ballot.
Yeah. Speaking of Arizona candidates, one of the other really great moments during the convention was Ruben Gallego bringing up all those elected officials who have been in the military.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. That was those were the kind of moments, Dev, that I think were brilliant about bringing out Kamala Harris's 2 little nieces to tell people how to pronounce Kamala.
And because that's such a part of who we are in America now. I was
like, we have more creative people on our side.
Well, it's just again, I say, as a entertainment person, it's all in the presentation.
Yeah.
That's when you hit people emotionally. When you it's called anchored. You have to anchor things in their emotion, and that's what the Democrats did so well. They anchored it. I saw when Waltz's son was crying, and I was crying, and I leapt up, and I was just applauding him, and then it anchored in me. And I'm usually they're playing my emotions here. I can see what they're doing here. No, they got me. I was so there, and I thought this is it. You have to hit people emotionally, because intellectually, there's so much misinformation. It's very concerning, and that's what they did so beautifully. And once you hit somebody emotionally, all of a sudden that flower opens. And they're ready.
And they were talking about emotions. They were talking about joy and hope and love. I also want to bring it around. I think that they also really discussed in a very positive way Kamala's contributions, her development over time in her career. Roy Cooper got up and talked about his work as an attorney general with her when the economy just tanked in 2008, and people were being foreclosed upon by the banks illegally, and how she stood her ground when there was an attempt to get everybody to accept a $4 billion deal with the banks in order for it to go away. She insisted it go up, and it ended up going up to $20 billion.
Right.
What a fighter! Who's got that experience? And they really delineated how much work she's been doing with 150 country leaders, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, because there was criticism, they did so much of that they were saying, well, she didn't speak. A lot of undecided said she didn't speak enough about what she's going to do. What is her plans? What is her platform? And okay, I can say, okay. And you people cannot hear that stuff. They won't believe it. It'll go right over their heads. They're not listening. unless you establish first this person's history,
right?
This what they are about, and once you're on board about what she is about, what she's done, where she comes from, then we can move into her specifics about what she's going to do. And people don't really. Well, she didn't. There was a lot of. I listened to a show where there was a lot of. Well, she didn't really talk about what she, her. What's her plans and her programs. It's like you would have even listened. You're not even going to listen anyways.
There's 2 more months of the campaign, and there's going to be a debate on September 10th.
We got to know who this person is. Yeah. Now, for instance, with Donald Trump.
Well, it would let the Republicans define her, because if she would have laid all that out, they'd have picked it apart.
Exactly.
They got a bunch of experts. So politically, it was brilliant. You got to know her first, and
that she's genuine, and you might want to. You might actually want to listen rather than going, no.
I'll tell you.
But she did give some specifics. She said, we will create a middle-class tax cut for 100 million people. Mm-hmm. That is very specific.
I agree. There was just a lot of commentary afterwards that she didn't lay out her plans enough, and I thought that was actually...
I'll point out one other thing.
It was disingenuous.
Yeah. It was disingenuous and untrue because she did give some very specific things about how she's going to build up the middle class.
One other thing that I thought was brilliant on her part and really striking to me, and people have been talking about this on the cable shows, she didn't once during her speech or pretty much any time use the phrase, I will be the first black woman president. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think that was brilliant is because she is basically saying, we've reached a point in our society where it doesn't have to be said anymore.
That's right.
You should accept this. It shouldn't be a novel thing that I'm a black woman, that I'm going to be president of the United States. And I think that was a deliberate thing that they decided to do.
Again, I think those who constructed this were brilliant in doing that. And I want to bring up something in contrast about getting people to know somebody. I worked horribly, I'm embarrassed to say, in reality TV for a short time. It was probably the worst job I've ever had in my life. But I had a lot of peers who worked with, in reality TV on The Apprentice.
Boo.
And
don't boo vote.
And then of course I can't remember the name of the producer that came up, the brainchild of The Apprentice.
Michael Burnett
no, it wasn't the Burnetts, but and he's come out recently stating I created a monster because Trump was a failing businessman in New York. He was sort of considered a buffoon, sort of interesting, sort of fun to have on a talk show, but he was kind of a buffoon. And they were trying to get somebody to star in The Apprentice, and they were businessmen like, no, I don't want to do it. But then Trump was like the perfect candidate because he was moldable,
right?
And so
he needed the money.
He needed the money, and he was moldable. So they created, just like I create characters, who, what, when, where. They created Trump, the successful businessman. Mm-hmm. It was not true, and people believe it like they bring it up, but he's so successful. No, it was manufactured by this producer for a television show. Reality shows aren't real. They're manipulated and manufactured with maybe a thread going through that's true. And so he was manufactured. People bought the manufacture.
People outside of New York.
Yeah, outside of New York. Yeah. But, and this producer is saying, what did I do now? What did I create? Because people are believing that and bringing it into reality, and now they want that faux actor to run our country. And so that's why I think it was so brilliant to really frame who Kamala was, where she's come from, because that's what people psychologically grab onto.
Right.
And they, I trust Trump because he's made so many million. Well, he's had so many bankers. Yeah, but that's all part of it. And he's always risen. And
that goes to all of the felonies he's gathered, the 34 felony fraud charges.
Yeah.
Because he's made his money on the backs of others and on lying and cheating and defrauding.
I personally know people who he's ripped off, vendors who he has ripped off. I also know, I
I've been reading on social media about from Republicans how upset they are that Democrats are being very mean to a guy with 34 felony convictions. Mike, what do you want? What did you want? We have a few minutes left. We'll wrap up.
9 cities that he owes money to.
That's right.
Over $500,000.
Right.
9 cities that he hasn't paid his bills in.
Other speeches to search for. Look for Sheriff Chris Swanson from Genesee County, Michigan. The most powerful speech from law enforcement, dressed in uniform, by the way, talking about Kamala Harris as the prosecutor he wants to have in court. It was a brilliant speech. Yeah. Find Leon Panetta, by the way.
Yes, that was great.
We're talking about the defense guy, chief of staff under 9 presidents, saying we're going to die. That our enemies will do us in if Trump is president. It's that simple. And Kamala's he didn't just talk about Trump's craziness. He talked about Kamala's competence,
right?
And how the steady hand is what we need. And even he also kind of said, I don't care what she decides. She is a steady hand that we need, and the other guy's nuts.
And that's the drumbeat in our short, how many more days that we have to beat that drum over and over and over again to break through the facade who so many people think Trump is.
Right. Diana, closing thoughts?
There's reasons to look at these speeches too. They're peppered with humor. Barack Obama talking about Trump's weird obsession with crowd sizes. So much fun.
I can't believe I'm so glad you brought that up.
And where he held his hands.
Exactly.
That 1 second stare down at his hands is like the most impressive 1 second that I think I've ever seen at a convention.
This entire convention was filled with fun.
Yeah.
And so it's not tedious or difficult to go through these speeches because they're inspiring and joyful.
I think ratings-wise, that more people watched it the first night than the entire Republic.
Well, I just saw the ratings for the last night. I think the Dems got 26.5 million, and the Republicans had like 24.
Oh,
so I think the end result was they said that was 500,000 more people watched the DNC.
Right. So, well, guys, this turned out to be a really lively, great conversation.
And I did get a chance to talk about the balloons.
Real quick, do the balloons. Just very short. Very short.
My only criticism is balloons because we are the environmental party, and balloons are so not.
I know, but it's tough not to have balloon drop at a convention.
I know, but we shouldn't have them at birthday parties or float them or okay. I won't say anymore.
Okay, that's great. Well, I really want to thank all of you. Diana Christensen, Mike Cosentino, Dev Ross, thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
You were all great. Pleasure. So I want to bring up a little special event that's happening that the Democrats of the Red Rocks are going to stage on August 29th. It's a 5 p.m. Zoom meeting where Andrew Watkins, who I had on my show last week talking about Christian nationalism in Project 2025, who has a great Substack blog, will discuss the many ways Project 2025 would affect our day-to-day existence if, God forbid, Donald Trump is elected. From the treatment of women to abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency to pushing a Christian agenda on citizens in exchange for public benefits. For more information about this Zoom on August 29th, go to the Democrats of the Red Rocks website at democratsoftheredrocks.org. Well, my friends, that's it for the Patriotic Progressive Show on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio. Many thanks to my producer in the booth, Ryan Thompson. Please tune in again next Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. when we'll again be talking about the aftermath of the Democratic Convention in Chicago. Consider it a part 2. But this time, with a couple of guests who are actually there, including the president of the Democrats of the Red Rocks, Ellen Ferreira, who was a delegate from Arizona. And remember, you can live stream our show on mellowmountainradio.com and hear the podcast version on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And at 10 a.m. this morning, please tune in for Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, when the subject will be transforming local AM and FM radio in Sedona and the Verde Valley. And my special in-studio guest will be the owner, general manager, program director of this radio station, and my show producer, the man who keeps KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio humming, Ryan Thompson. Thanks for listening to the Patriotic Progressive for truth, justice, and the democratic way. Have a great week, everybody.